Hey everyone, and welcome to the second episode in my Crossy Road game tutorial series. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to add cars into your game. So let's hop right into it. Before we start programming, I'd like to show the costumes. The first one is just called Normal Car, and as you can see, it's just kind of an ordinary car, and I've designed all of these sprites facing to the right. Then I have one called Taxi, and it is what you expect, a taxi, and I have a top-down one of a sports car, and they're all slightly different. Okay, so I'm in the cars, and I'm going to start by pulling out a when I receive start game. Then I'm going to broadcast and do a new message and name this one reset cars, like so. Then I'm going to do a when I receive and do reset cars, and this is just going to be where we reset everything. So before we can even start with anything, we need to make the kind of scroll x variable. So as you can see, if we go into the ground here, we have this go to ground x minus scroll x and all that stuff. We need the same thing for cars. Head into the player and see this go to, drag it in there. Then put that back. And now we can do a when I receive update inside of the cars and then go to all that. But we don't want the cars to go to the player X and player Y. We want them instead to go to their own variables. So let's make two new variables. The first one's going to be car X, and make sure you do for the sprite only. And the second one is car Y, also for the sprite only. Now we can change these player X and player Y to car X and car Y like that. Now they have their own variables. But because they have their own variables, we want to make sure we reset them. So let's set car X and car Y to 0 and 0 on the when I receive reset cars. So now it should be hiding, and if we show it, as you can see, it's for some reason it's size 7. So let's make it back to 100% size, but it is actually scrolling in our environment. And once we go away, as you can see, it goes to the bottom of the screen. Now let's go ahead and make it to where when the car goes off the screen, it disappears, because right now it kind of just sticks to the bottom. So to do this, let's make a brand new block and name this a go to, and then a colon, and do input X and input Y, and then do run screen without refresh. Next, let's go ahead and pull this go to right by here and do go to for the when I receive update and change these two values like that, and then just do go to X and then Y. So it should be doing the exact same thing now, but this will allow us to make it go off the screen. So if we do an if else and then an equals and then another equals, and put the equals on both sides and put this in the if else, all we need to do is if X and then equals to X position, then if Y equals to Y position. So that's pretty simple. Then if it does, then we're going to show, otherwise we're going to hide, and that is actually it. So now when we start, as you can see, we can't see it, and that's because we just need to move to the right or to the left. For some reason, it'll pop up after that. And as you can see now, if we go off the screen, pop, as you can see, it goes away and you can't see it, but if we restart, there it is again. So that is working fine. On the ground, as you can see, we have this clone equals to yes, and then if it is, then show, otherwise hide. That way it hides the initial sprite. We can do the same thing in the cars. So let's make the same variable clone with a question mark and do for the sprite only. Then right here, let's set this clone to no, and then duplicate this and set it to yes in a when I start as a clone. Then right here, where it says show, we're going to do an if else and do if the clone is equal to yes, then if it is, show, otherwise we're still going to hide. So now if we start, you shouldn't see any car, and that's because we don't have any clones. So if we just click create clone with myself, there we go. As you can see, the car has now appeared. Alrighty, so now we need to make a list that is going to keep track of all the positions of where we want the cars to spawn, and this is going to be called car spawn Y, and this is going to be for all sprites, and we're going to click OK. Delete all of car spawn Y in this reset cars. Let's go ahead and make a new block inside of the ground sprite and name this costume setup. Do run screen without refresh and click OK. Pull out the switch costume to and put it in there. And then put a costume setup underneath the change ground thing, all that stuff. Now let's go ahead and do a if else here and do if pick random 1 to 10 equals to 50 and change this to 1 to 2 is equal to 1. So this means when the game first starts, it's going to have a 50% chance to be a road. Pick random 2 to 3, which as you can see is just the 2 road sprites. And by the way, I have tweaked some of these roads. As you can see, I've added patches and new grass and stuff. Then in the else, let's go ahead and just switch costume to ground 1, which is, if you remember, the blank kind of just grassy place. Now let's go ahead and do a add thing to car spawn Y up here and do the ground Y. So it's going to add its Y position into this list. If we go ahead and show this car Y list and we start this game, as you can see, it should actually, whenever it switches to the road costume, it actually should add its Y position into this list. There you go. As you can see, here's a road and it's added its Y position 1095. Then if we keep going, there we go. It's 1460 now. Now to make this perform a little bit better, I don't want it to infinitely fill up this list because eventually we'll get to like 15,000 and then it'll lag up. All we need to do is make a block and name this delete spawn Y and do run screen without refresh, delete spawn Y like this. And also I spelled setup wrong, oops. And in the delete spawn Y, what you want to do is an if statement like this and then a greater than and do 2 and do if the length of car spawn Y is greater than 2, then delete 1 of car spawn Y. Right now it is not appearing to work. That is because we put it in the wrong spot. See this delete car spawn Y? We want to put this in the when I receive update. So as soon as we do, as you can see, it deletes the very first one. Now if we keep going, it should once in a while replace these. So now let's go ahead and test. There we go. As you can see, it added one to the list, but then it deleted the first one. So it actually looks like nothing happened, but it's actually clearing out the old unused one. So that just kind of optimizes the system a bit more. So now that we have the information for the cars to spawn at, we need to just make the cars detect that, hey, I need to spawn. So see this when I receive start game and all this stuff, wait 0.1 seconds and then a forever loop. So this is where it's going to actually detect it. Now let's do an if else and then do an equals. Next, let's do a car spawn Y equals blank, which means this list is empty. Then we're going to delete this clone. That way it clears out all of these cars in the beginning. Then switch costume to pick random 1 to 3. So it switches to any 3 of these costumes. And then a create clone of myself. Then let's go ahead and do a wait 1 second. So now let's make a new block and name this car clone setup like this. And then do space and do color and add an input and do color, then add a label and do size, colon, and then add an input and do size. So these are just some things that we can do to set this thing up and click OK. Now when I start as a clone, let's do car clone setup and set the size to 10% in the beginning, and that is going to make it really small. So let's go ahead and find this algorithm in the player right here, this change size by, and pull this bad boy in there. Then let's go ahead and do this in the when I receive update like this. That way it basically will set the size to 10% and then this algorithm will make it smooth back into 100%, so it makes it look like it just kind of pops in. Then for the color, let's do pick random 1 and to 10, but let's change it to 100. Then let's go ahead and set the car X to 0 and the car Y to item 1 of car spawn Y, except let's do item length of car Y. So it's going to spawn the cars at the latest item in the list. So now let's go ahead and go until we find a road. Here is a road, and as you can see, here we go, it is making some cars right smack dab in the middle of the road, which is very good. And then if we go ahead and keep going until we find another road, here we go, as you can see, the cars are still being created on this road. Set car X to over here and set the car X all the way to -300 like that. Then do a repeat until and do repeat until car X is greater than 300, which means we're going all the way to the right side of the screen and we're going to point in direction 90, and make sure you don't set the car X inside of the repeat until like I did. And then let's do a change and do change car X for now. Let's do 3 and a go to front layer underneath there, and then at the very end let's delete this clone. So now we should see that these cars are spawning at the very left of the side of the screen and moving over. Here we go, as you can see, we have some cars moving in a perfectly straight line. Right now you may notice they are all kind of the same color, so that we don't have the color effect going on for us. Let's do set color effect effect to the color. So now we should be seeing that these cars are random colored, but as you can see, the taxi is also being a random color. I don't want the taxi to be a random color. Let's do an if else and do equal, and let's do costume name equals to normal car, which is our very first one. Then we're going to set color effect to color, duplicate this if car equals for car, then set a color effect like that, and else if it equals to taxi like this, then we're going to actually clear graphics effects like this. So now you should be seeing that when taxis spawn, they should always be yellow. So there we go, we have a yellow taxi, but the other cars are a random color. And actually, to make this better, you can just set color effect to color up top and then just do that. So if it's a taxi, it'll set its color effect to random, but then it'll clear it because it detects it down here. You may be wondering why we're leaving these blank. That is because this is where we're going to put the car speed. So let's make a variable and name this car speed and do for the sprite only. So now in the normal car, let's do the car speed to 5. In the taxi, let's make this 7. And actually, let's move this taxi down here like that and put the sports car last. Then let's, for the taxi, set car speed to 7. And last but not least, in the sport car, let's set the speed to 12. That way they all have their own unique speed. And then let's do a change the car X by car speed over there. So that way it actually works. So now let's go ahead and go up, and you should be seeing that now they all have their own speed. This is slow, this one's faster, and there should be, there we go, there's a sport car, and as you can see, flew by way faster than all of them. The cars actually spawn in a straight line. I don't want that. I want them to spawn on like the top and the bottom, or if it's a big road, even in the middle. To do this, I want to make a variable and name this car spawn position like that, and that's going to be for all sprites. If else here, and this car Y like that, and do an if equals and do if the car spawn position is equal to bottom, then we're going to set the car Y item length of car spawn Y of car spawn Y like this, so it always does the latest one. And then we can do plus, and we'll want to make it offsetted a little bit. So to do this, let's make a variable called car spawn offset. So this is going to make it offset a little bit, and this is going to be for all sprites, so we can do that plus the car spawn offset. But this isn't going to do anything right now because this is just 0. So let's go into the ground here and make it to where once it sets up the costume, it's going to detect what costume it is. Then in the repeat, let's make this not run screen without refresh and do an if statement underneath there. Now let's do a if the costume number is equal to 2, which is the smaller ground, then we're going to set that car spawn offset to 50. So it's going to offset it by 50 pixels. Then if it's equal to 3, then we're going to offset it by 90 pixels. So now every time we find a new road, it should set it to 50 if it's small and then 90 if it's big. So let's go ahead and find a road. So here we go. Here is a big one, and as you can see, the car spawn offset is 90. And here's a small one, and the car spawn offset is 50. Now let's go ahead and in the start game for the cars, let's set the car spawn position to bottom. So the reason I'm going to do this instead of just making it randomly spawn is because on the road, the cars will actually be over top of each other because they all have different speeds. So to fix this, we want to make it to where it can spawn in 3 positions. It'll be bottom, top, or middle. It'll rotate them. So if it's bottom, it'll go to middle. Then if it's middle, it'll go to top. So that way it will hopefully never be on top of each other. So in the beginning, we set it to bottom. And if it's equal to bottom, then we're going to go to all of that plus the car spawn offset. Except if you think about it, if it's on the bottom, we want it to go down. So we want it to be car spawn offset times -1. So instead of 90, say, it's going to be -90. Let's go ahead and duplicate this and do top. And we're going to put this underneath it because we want to go top to bottom. So if it equals to top, then we're going to set it to all that. And we're just going to do normal car spawn offset like that. Then duplicate it one last time and name this one middle. So if it's in the middle, then we can just go to this and don't do any offset. So it's just like that. So it's going top, middle, then else it's going to be bottom. And we can change this to an if statement like so. So now it's going to detect if it's the top, middle, or bottom, but right now it should only be spawning at the bottom because we don't have it rotating yet. So if we keep going, we should see cars are spawning on the bottom of the road. So here we go, the cars are spawning at the very bottom of this road, and this one is a big road, and this one is a small road, and they're also perfectly spawning at the bottom, but it's stuck on bottom. So let's make it to where it rotates between all of them. So if it's equal to top, let's set the car spawn position to middle. Then if it's equal to middle, let's make it go to the bottom underneath there. Then if it is the bottom, let's make it go back to the top. So now it's going to infinitely loop. Every time a car spawns, it's going to go through all of the positions, so it should be rotating. There we go. As you can see, boom, then boom, boom, and it's rotating through the positions. And then if we go to the new road, as you can see, it's rotating through all the positions. Now you may notice something as you're playing. So here we have a road, they're spawning all in the right position, and it's working awesome. But if we go up a little bit, as you can see, they stop spawning even if we're on this road, because we are making it to where it always spawns cars at the latest position. But in our list, as you can see, it has 2 items, which means we still have the data of the last position of the spawning, so we can still make it spawn at both positions so it looks better. That way it doesn't just stop spawning cars because it detects a road up ahead like it did there. So to do this, we need a new variable. So let's make a variable and name this car spawn item for all sprites. Set that car spawn item to 1. Then let's do an if else and do if the car spawn item is equal to 1. We're going to do basically the same thing we did for the positions. If it's top, then it'll go middle. If it's middle, it'll go bottom, and then it'll loop. But we're going to basically do it for numbers. So if car spawn item is 1, then set it to 2. Otherwise, set it to 1. So it's just going to go back and forth, and put this at the very top of this. So now, as you can see, every time a car spawns, it's going to rotate through the car spawn item. So let's go ahead and go until we find a road, and there we go, it's rotating through this. So eventually, we'll have 2 items in the list, and this car spawn item is going between 1 and 2. So basically, we can just make it to spawn item, car spawn item. So it'll be 1, then 2, then 1, then 2. So it spawns on both rows. So that's why we want 2 items in there. But right now we only have 1. So if we go ahead, so if we did the spawn item, car spawn item, it's going to only spawn half of the cars because there's no item 2 in the list yet, as you can see. So we need to make it to where it only loops this if there's enough items in the list. So let's do if and go down to variables and do length of car spawn y is greater than 1, which means we have 2 in there. Then we can do this looping like this. So now, as you can see, it'll stop looping. But if we go ahead and find another road, it'll start looping because we have 2 items in the list. So this is working. So instead of doing item length of car spawn y, we can do item car spawn item in here. So if we change all of those to car spawn items, as you can see, it's going to rotate and actually spawn in both of these still because it's rotating through all of the lists, which is awesome. So that means no matter what we do, we're always going to have all of our road spawning cars. So here's a road here, and look at this. It's still spawning down there, but it's also spawning up here. Okay, so now if you think about this, if we only have 1 road, then it's going to create a clone every 1 second, which is perfect. But if we have 2 roads, then it's going to rotate between those with this loop right here. So we're only going to spawn half the cars on both of the roads. So we basically want to create 2 clones if we have multiple roads. So duplicate this if length of car spawn y is greater than 0, and then change it to an if else. So switch costume to pick random 1 to 3, and if greater than 1, then we're going to repeat 2 times create clone. That way it makes 2. Otherwise, just make 1. So now, as you can see, there should be a normal amount of cars if we have 1 road. As you can see, every 1 second 1 spawns. But if we have multiple roads and they're all on the same screen at once, Okay, so here's a big road and here's a small road, but as you can see, it's creating two at once, so that way we still have a lot of cars on both of our roads. We want to make the cars right when they spawn detect what type of road they are on. That way it'll always keep track of, hey, I should not be on a big road. So we're going to do an if else in the cars and do if the car spawn offset is equal to 50, then that means we're on a small road. So let's make a variable that's going to keep track of this. So we'll name this car on road, then do for the sprite only, and if it's 50, then we're gonna set the car on road to small because it is small. Otherwise, we're gonna set it to large because it's on a large road. Now let's go ahead and in this repeat until right here, we can do a say and do say car on road. So that means that way we can see if this is working or not. So as you can see right here is a road and it's not spawning. That's because we didn't put the loop back. But now if we put the loop back, as you can see, this is a large road and it says large. And here's a small road. And as you can see, these guys say small. So we can go ahead and delete that. So basically what we can do is make it to where it won't spawn cars in the middle on small roads. So to do this, we do duplicate this one and do if the car on road is equal to small. We shouldn't spawn in the middle. Then on the top, as you can see, we're setting it to middle. So if the car on road is equal to small, blank else set it to middle. And if it is, then let's go ahead and just immediately set it back to bottom. So it just skips the middle one entirely. So now we should have it to where it will only spawn cars in the middle on a big old road. So here's a big road, and as you can see, the car is spawning in the middle. But if we keep going and try to find one of our little bee-boo roads, this one, here's a small one. As you can see, they're only spawning on the top, which is actually kind of strange. To fix this, we need to make it wait a little bit because it's doing it way too fast. So right on the if top, middle, and bottom, put a wait block and change this to 0.1. So go ahead and duplicate all of them. So if it's top, wait 0.01 seconds. If it's middle, and at the bottom of all these loops like this. So now if we go ahead and restart this project, we should see making a blinking car right here. Make sure to set the clone is yes at the bottom of this car clone setup. So now it'll go ahead and make that go away. Do a when I start as a clone, do hide. And I'm not sure if this is going to matter, but let's try to make it to where it changes up the order a bit. So instead of starting with the top, let's make it start with the bottom. So change the bottom to an if else and do if the car spawn is equal to bottom, then let's set all of this like so. Then let's go ahead and do middle, and last but not least, change this one to an else for the top. So we're just switching around the order a bit. So it goes bottom, middle, top. So it just goes bottom to top now. Then let's go ahead and make the top rotate to the bottom rotate to the top or the middle. So if it's equal to small, then rotate to the top, otherwise go to the middle and wait 0.1 seconds. So that's we kind of just switched it around a bit. So here's the scripts if you want to pause. So if it's bottom, then it'll go to the right position, and if it's small, then it'll go to the top instead of the middle. But if it's big, then it'll go to the middle, and then the middle, we want to make sure that we set it back to top, so that way we have an infinite loop. Then the middle will go, okay, I'll go to the position, then I'll go to the top, then it sets to the top, then the top will say, okay, let's go back to the bottom, then it'll go to the bottom, and that will make it a infinite loop. So I'm not entirely sure if that will fix our problem. So here's the cars, they are spawning. Yay, awesome. And here's our big road, and as you can see, they're spawning in the right position. All of the cars are awesome, and they are still just spawning at the top. Okay, let's just try to do some troubleshooting. So let's wait a 0.1 seconds and make it go to the middle. So now it should be working correctly. There you go, it's rotating through all of them. So instead, let's make it go to the top, and maybe that'll work. So it goes top, and that is our problem. So it's not actually this if else statement here, so that we know we can put that back and it's not the problem. Okay, so now I'm just playing around. Let's see if we can set the cars spawn Y at the top and then wait and then set these position to bottom, and oh, there it is. As you can see, it is working. So now let's go ahead and do the same for the others. Put the wait in between the go to. So now as you can see, it is properly rotating between them. So instead of doing everything then waiting, let's do go to the position then wait 0.1 seconds. So that means this is working properly. Okay, so those were some funky bugs. I hope that I help you fix them, but now it is spawning on top and bottom for the small road. But if we find a big road, it should spawn in the middle as well. Here we go, it's rotating through all of them. Beautiful. And here it's spawning on all 3 sides as it should be, and here it's spawning on top and bottom. So now we have the cars properly spawning. Now let's make it to where the direction the cars come from is random. So to do this is actually simple. Let's go into the ground and make a new variable and name this road direction like this. Then this is going to be for all sprites, and we're going to go ahead and do a if else and do a pick random 1 to 2 is equal to 1. You could just duplicate that one. And if it is equal to 1, then we're going to set the road direction to R, which is right. Otherwise, let's set it to left. And then let's put this in this loop right here. So every time a road spawns, it will actually just make the variable road direction random between right and left. Now let's do an if else and do if the road direction is equal to R. Then we're going to do what we already did. Otherwise, we're going to do repeat until car X is less than -300. So that is off the left side of the screen. Then we're going to do all of that except point in direction -90 and do change cars by car speed times -1, and make sure to set the car X to -100 at the beginning of the right and set it to 300 at the beginning of the left, like that. So now we should see that every time we come across a road, it'll randomly pick the side it comes from. So here we go. This road is actually a right-sided road, so it'll always spawn from the right. But this side, it always spawns from the left. This just makes it a little bit more random to make it more interesting. I want it to where if it spawns a slow car, then it's going to basically make it wait a little bit longer than 1 second. But if it's fast, it will still wait a shorter amount of time. So duplicate all the costumes there and go ahead and delete all the contents inside of it. So if it's a normal car, then we're going to wait a whole 1.8 seconds. Then if it is a taxi, then we're only going to wait 0.9 seconds because the taxi is faster, so we can spawn another car quickly. Then a sport car, let's do 0.5 seconds. So now if we go ahead and do this, it should be spawning at the right spot, and it should not be spawning over top of each other. There we go. As you can see, now the cars are by themselves, and it's working awesome. And you can maybe even adjust these values, maybe 1.5 for the normal card. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really do hope it helped you out, and if it did, then make sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing. This was super fun to make cars spawn into our world. Stay tuned for the next episode because I think I will be making it to where when you hit the cars, you'll actually get squished, because right now you can just go through them, and I'll probably be adding particles, so stay tuned for that. But anyway, this has been Owen, and I am out.